Good morning.
Boker Tov, everyone. We continue our journey through the Omer. The Omer is that practice in the Torah itself that says one counts from Pesach through to Shavuot, and it became a way of counting, of marking our own development as human beings. As okay, you're free, but how do you then receive Torah, a new beginning? So it's a period where we go through all kinds of things on the way to receiving Torah, and and in the Kabbalah, every day is a different aspect that you work on. The mercy of foundation.
Because our job is to learn to be good, right?
We do our best.
Learn to understand.
Yeah. And there's different pillars to religious life, but working on oneself makes us into a better vessel for all the other parts, right? And to do good in the world and to reach God. So I mentioned this last time, the Magid of Mezerich, successor to Baal Shem Tov, said it's like, religious life is like you're trying to connect a pipe to the spring at the top of a mountain to bring the water down into the fields. We're all the pipes, and we want the water, God's water, to go through us. The source is God, and we want the water to go through us, and the world is the fields. And it's by doing this work, we plug some of the holes in the pipe, and we remove some of the dross, and we widen our pipes by doing some of this work, the self-transformation work. Because if not, you can be a leaky pipe. Nobody wants to be a leaky pipe.
Or a blocked pipe.
Or a blocked pipe.
Blocked pipe is worse than a leaky
Yeah,
pipe.
blocked pipe is even, it might explode. And so, in as we're going through this, what we've been doing, right, is looking at not at the such specific ideas as what the Kabbalah is saying day per day. Maybe another time we could do something like that, but looking at broader concepts of self-transformation, which I think are relevant to all of our lives. The first one we did was anger. We did the joy of battle last week. And this week is called Look to Yourself. And again, I'm indebted to my father for bringing some of these together in his teachings. An idea that, we're always busy. And Judaism has such a big tradition in not engaging in gossip or speaking about other people, right? It's a huge part of Judaism, lashon hara, right? Not to engage in speaking ill of others, which I don't always love how our tradition can be a little, I'm not saying one should speak ill of others, but they're so absolute about it, and it doesn't. I'm not sure it works with our modern society as well. But I think that some of these teachings we're bringing today, from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, and the Hasidic, they bring it up in a deeper and more profound way. So it's look to yourself instead of looking to others, right? Look at your own issues, not go looking at others, because what's the expression? We tend to make a mountain out of a molehill for others, and for ourselves we do the opposite. Our mountains, we make them into molehills, right? Our faults. Everybody should be understanding of our fault, but others, we look at the little thing, and it's, we see the mountain. So anybody anything evokes for you? Look to yourself instead of looking to others.
Well, like this first thing, do not
Yeah.
condemn your fellow man until you have stood in this place. I've always been like, there, but for the grace of God go I.
Say that again?
That trouble.
Yeah.
If you run and fix yourself.
Well, it's really hard, right? I mean, it's a really hard thing, because we're kind of wired to do it. And
It was like easy to say, oh, why are they doing that?
why are they doing that?
Why is it easier to do that?
What?
why is it easier to be critical of other people
I mean,
than
it just seems
yourself?
like that's what people
I mean,
do.
what's the
Well-
thing here?
To your self-reflection, you, whether consciously or pre-consciously, have your entire context. But of course, if I encounter you in this moment, it's just a data point without context. Right, and so I don't know,
No,
like,
no.
let's say you're,
Oh,
a
yeah.
little bad, but for you today, that's actually incredible improvement. But of course, I don't know all that context.
Well,
I mean,
it's also when someone else is being bad, that we human beings are sensitive beings, so we experience their bad or we experience their this, and straight away we judge
Well,
them.
but we
Well,
experience it out of context, is what you're saying. We
Mhm.
experience that as the singular presentation of the person at
Right.
that
Mhm.
moment. So we don't have the whole person.
Information, yeah.
maybe
to-
you're bad now, but you used to be awful. Yesterday
Yeah.
you were worse, but now you're
Hey,
bad.
Yeah.
You should celebrate.
That's a good
But,
explanation.
Yeah.
That's really
That's,
good.
I mean, that's exactly what it's saying here, right? To not condemn your fellow man till you've stood in this place, cause
Mhm.
think about what they're going through. And once you start thinking about what they're going through, then you might get more of the context,
Right.
which is missing, and I love that, and what I sometimes. What the person expresses in the outer, we always think everybody understands automatically what's going on in the inner, but how can you understand unless that person tells you, most of the cases, I mean, that's loved ones especially, but if we don't communicate what's going on in the inner part, nobody knows, they just experience the outer, the outer tip of it. But that's a charitable part. There's also, just, people, we have a propensity to bond over talking about part of our social nature as beings, and I mean, Judaism, we teach this so intensely in Jewish religious schools. There's about 1,000 Jewish stories about not,
Mm.
judging or speaking ill of others, because you can't take back your words,
Mm.
right? And once your words are out,
So the fact that they spent a lot of time teaching that means that their propensity is to do that. So they, if you have an intense
Mhm.
teaching, it means that
Mhm.
there's something
There's
that
this strong-
needs
Mhm.
teaching on all of this.
Yeah.
But if you have the capacity to apologize
Yeah, well, and
to
that's,
the person.
and that's. Right, where we're big, we have our holiest day is Yom Kippur, right?
Right.
And our holiest period is leading up to Yom Kippur. We're supposed to, Yom Kippur is for sins between you and God,
Right.
but the 10 days before, you have a duty
Right.
to go apologize to people, and
Mhm.
you ask 3 times, and if they don't give you they don't grant you the apology, if you've been sincere, then it's on them, no longer on you.
Mhm.
I often wonder, what do people do who don't believe in God? Who do they talk to or ask for help or pray, or what do they just?
Well, they don't,
Or-
they talk to themselves or to their therapist or
Sure.
or to their
There's
loved
always
ones.
somebody to talk to.
There's always somebody, they talk to you, I was gonna say, they talk to you.
Hey, God,
Yeah, well,
God's free.
God.
God's
Wow.
just there for
Yeah.
you.
Possibly.
there's. Well,
It's
but
hard to speak to people like that, though, because
About-
they're real negative about God.
mhm. Well, but it's true that to speak. It maybe the God is the best person to talk about this stuff too. If your therapist also can't get into the head of the other person, but God somehow, because it's really about working stuff within oneself with this particular. But so anybody else have anything I want to share, or we'll get into it? Okay. Before we get into all the Hasidic teachings about it, I wanted to get into the story that illustrates this most powerfully. It's actually part of a Baal Shem Tov story. He quotes the story at some bit, but I wanted to bring the whole story from Samuel 2. And this is after King David has sinned. And right, this is the story of he saw a beautiful woman sunbathing on a roof, and thought, and figured out that she was married, and found a way to make the husband disappear, and then convene her to his presence, and she got pregnant soon later. So different, I don't know how many of you have been watching the show David on
Mm.
Oh, we
Amazon Prime.
started
Yeah.
watching that.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
we gotta
good,
go
it's really
back to
good,
it,
right?
yeah.
So there's, right, when you study the story of David, there's a difference between David before he becomes king and after he becomes king, and after he becomes king, power begins to change how
What network
Well,
is
the-
that on again?
Amazon
Amazon.
Prime, yeah, it's very good. So, Bonnie, if you don't mind reading for us
Okay.
Samuel 2.
Ethics of the father. Do not contemn your fellow man until you have stood in his place. Samuel 2. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said, there were two men in the same city, one rich and one poor. The rich man had very large flocks and herds, but the poor man had only one little ewe lamb that he had bought. He tended it, and it grew up together with him and his children. It used to share his morsel of bread, drink from his cup, and nestle in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him. One day a traveler came to the rich man, but he was loath to take anything from his own flocks or herds to prepare a meal for the guest who had come to him. So he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. David flew into a rage against the man and said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He shall pay for the lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and showed no pity. And Nathan said to David, that man is you. Thus said the Lord, God of Israel, it was I who anointed you king over Israel, and it was I who rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and possession of your master's wives, and I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that were not enough, I would give you twice as much more. Why then have you flouted the command of the Lord and done what displeases him? You have put Uriah the Hittite to the sword. You took his wife and made her your wife, and had him killed by the sword of the Ammonites. Therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you spurned me by taking the wife of Uriah the Hittite and making her your wife. Thus said the Lord, I will make a calamity rise against you from within your own house. I will take your wives and give them to another man before your very eyes, and he shall sleep with your wives under this very sun. You acted in secret, but I will make this happen in the sight of all Israel and in broad daylight. Heavy.
Intense, the messing of God, right? God sees everything.
So God
And the
is
baby dies
just
too.
as bad as David is with his interest in vengeance.
Well,
Vengeance.
God, yes. Well, God said you named your own punishment, right? Like, so what would you do to the person who did that? I said, if you pay 4 times the price. So you kind of named your own punishment, but when we see it, it does play out in this way to some degree. It's not quite as bad as his proclamation here. And actually what happens, it's worth saying it, David does repent, right? He repents and he turns to God, and God eventually takes him back, and David goes back into God's graces. So it's not
Maybe God
Something.
felt that he wouldn't get the fullness of what he had done wrong unless he really made him suffer.
yeah. Well, it's
He takes
amazing.
his son, he takes his newborn 30-day-old, I think, baby, and
Yeah.
makes him die. So there are different scales here, but that's only then does David.
Correct. Yeah.
Ah.
Well, it's the story of Nathan telling him, right, is exactly, to helping him to see what he did wrong, right? In his mind, he didn't think about it. He just acted and followed his desires, and then the beautiful prophetic way the prophets go to the crux of the matter to show him exactly what's the issue here, and put in broad daylight before him. And that story is one of my favorite passages of how the prophets are so clear in their message, right? How much they bring what's going on. Let's go to the Baal Shem Tov.
The one
Brian.
thing I
Oh,
would
go ahead,
add
go
to
ahead,
that,
go ahead, Diane, go ahead, Dan, go ahead, go ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
The one thing I would just say about that too is, God is always so generous and forgiving, when we seek his forgiveness, but it doesn't erase the damage that we've done by our actions. And so it was just kind of that sort of thing. Forgiveness, doesn't necessarily mean that it erases the bad things that we've done with our actions or the consequences that we're going to receive because of our actions. Just a thought, just tossing it up.
Well, I mean, David does other things that's where he didn't listen perfectly to God, but here he went overboard. I mean, in his mind, this is what kings do, but he had one of his own soldiers killed on purpose and took his wife, and then that's a pretty big, not pretty big infringement of what the God wanted. And so we see this throughout in the story of Saul even more, right? Except God completely loses faith of Saul and doesn't. It's exactly what we in the show, the Amazon Prime show, but that God has very high expectations of people and then and their moral ethical behavior, especially the kings and queens. But look to yourself, and here he's judging the person in the story, and really he's judging himself, and that's actually where the Baal Shem Tov was going to go with this in one of the teachings. But God does forgive him. It's amazing. I mean, he pays in this very biblical way a price for it, right? His child dies, his baby dies, but he, in the end, he does come back. He dies as king of Israel, and Solomon builds a temple, and we still sing David Melech Israel Chai V'Kayam, and we saw a tradition Mashiach comes from David, so his name was restored. It didn't, his whole house wasn't. So David, even though you read this and you think David's gone, he does come back. He's given God's, God is very harsh, but God then forgives him after he's paid the severe price and seeing his own children rise up against him. Baal Shem Tov.
Okay, Baal Shem Tov, Al HaTorah. In righteousness you shall judge your people. This means that you should judge your friend favorably. The Baal Shem Tov explains the verse. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the despised. That when you see a wicked person commit some despicable act or grievous sin, you should judge him favorably. He only did it because his passions overcame him, and he has a coarse physical nature, or doesn't realize the seriousness of the crime. You should think these things and similar thoughts. Then you also shall save yourself from judgment. For seeing this low thing in your friend should make you realize that you share a similar trait, and that there are judgments and accusations upon you as well. When you can judge your friend favorably, you will likewise be judged. By not arousing judgment upon a sinner who is overcome by his desires, you fulfill the verse, you shall not incline the judgment of your poor in his dispute. When trials and conflicts overwhelm him in the waters of dispute, evil, malicious waters, you should arouse favorable judgments upon him. Really, this is all a great test, for a person is never sentenced for his crimes until he has first passed judgment upon himself. Since he will certainly not judge himself, they show him a person who did something similar. When he passes judgment upon the latter, he seals the judgment upon himself as well.
So you see, that's why I brought it right after. Well, so he's saying this is actually a cosmic way that the universe works. That if there's something that God wants to show you within yourself in his work, he'll bring it up in someone else, and you'll judge that person. Say, that person is terrible because they did this. when you see it, you're really seeing something within your own self. And in the moment that you judge them, it's like you're just like David, you're passing judgment on yourself for your own thing that you did. So, anybody have any examples?
Express something favorable to someone when you see them having done something terrible.
Well,
How do you-
favorable would be saying, is saying not,
We don't talk bad, poorly about.
well, more favorably, that doesn't mean you suddenly say, oh, they're amazing, they're wonderful, but it's not judging them for it. Saying, not expecting the worst, but trying to see the best in it.
Or always being generous.
Or being generous.
Yeah, I think that
Done.
has to do with generosity.
Generosity.
Whipping yourself up no matter what, to feel a sense of generosity. I mean, we've read this from the Baal Shem Tov's group before too, about giving to charity, helping, etc. So, but judgment should also partake of the attitude of generosity.
Yeah, well, the ethics of the fathers itself says, dan lekavschu, you should judge in the side of merit as a person. So it's to judge a person favorably.
From
It's
perspective.
so it's saying, from perspective of merit. So it's don't see the worst. It's
See the
trying
good
to
things.
see not and just you see someone do something, straight away think it must be because that person's going through a really hard time, or it must be because or if I was in their place, I would do much worse, or always try and go there rather than look how horrible what they did is.
Well, you're judging them on he or she on one thing they've done without thinking about all the positive things that they made.
Also, right, yeah,
Yeah, that's what your point.
there's a
Right.
but there's a not sure where it's from, but a statement that human beings, another person could do 99 good things for you and one bad, and you'll always see the one.
One bad.
And God is the opposite. God will see 99 bad things you do and the one good, but God will hold on to the one good thing you've done. And that's the difference between human beings and God. And it's true, right? We see even the people in our lives we're very close to, I think. So they see, they'll do so many good things for us, but then the one thing they do there, they'll irritate us. Well, that's what we focus on. That's like, why are you doing that? Like we did all day long, they've been doing good things.
Like little kids,
Yeah.
they do something and then you're mad at the kid, but forget about how much you love the kid and all the good things the child brings you.
But there's a lot of, these are all very universal subjects, but remember reading about a Rebbe who would just tell his people, because the way it worked with the Hasidic courts, you have the whole families and groups, everybody's together, and he would tell, just don't judge, don't look at anybody, don't anybody come to me and tell to me that person is doing something wrong. I just don't want to hear it. It's refuse to hear it. It's like, figure it out amongst yourselves. We're all here to improve ourselves. Look to yourself first, right? If you're in this place, it means you're on a religious journey, and figure your own thing first. Don't tell me what that other person is doing. And he would refuse to hear, completely 100% refuse to hear any complaints. Just sit silently in this way, and okay, it's like, which
But it's so true about, I probably do it also, everybody does it. You don't like one particular thing about the person, so you don't want to have anything to do with them, and you forget about all the good things about the person.
you forget all the good things about the person, and we'll get to also it's like you bond with this other person and on the negative, and we all do it. That's why the gossip thing is so. But
I think about this one person that has told me this, who belongs to our congregation, whose kids don't like his political thing and won't let the grandchildren see him. How about all the years he raised the kids?
Oh, that's so sad.
Like, how do you do that? It's so hard to comprehend.
Well,
The way,
go ahead.
the way you arrange these passages was so powerful to me. Because first you have David, the great parable, "Thou art the man," and all of that, and then you switch to the Baal Shem Tov saying something totally not contradictory precisely, but a totally different approach to dealing with the sin. I just thought that was so powerful. I kept going back and forth and between the prophet Nathan and what he was teaching and what the Baal Shem Tov was teaching. And I mean, you did that very deliberately. I just wanted to sort of voice that. I thought it was so powerful. It's not an easy question.
But I mean, it's interesting because, right, you share similar traits. So he's saying you only see it if you have it in yourself. If you didn't have it in yourself, you wouldn't be able to see it. You wouldn't even be able to see it, which that's
That may be right. That
Yeah,
may be right. I
I-
mean, it may be that you don't have it in yourself, but you have the abstract concept of it in yourself. And you've learned it's very complicated what's in yourself and what's in other people. It's not something that's absolutely clear.
But it is true that I remember reading somewhere an account by someone who was once a thief, and he said that he'd given up that life, but that whenever he was walking on the street and felt someone come up behind him, he was worried they were going to rob him, because once you've done it, you know that possibility, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
well,
So-
the
so-
psychologists make a lot of that. They call that projection.
Mhm.
So that you take something, I mean, this is sort of a modern way of looking at this. You take something that's in yourself, you deny it
Mhm.
within yourself. And in the process of denying it, you project it and see it in the other person. We have a president who's interested in those kinds of that particular form of psychological or whatever it is. And there's something to that for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This is kind of off track.
Sure.
It's kind of one
No problem.
step removed from it. but
Sure.
I do part-time editing for the Illinois Information Agency for the Criminal Justice System. And there was a workshop yesterday that had former people who had been incarcerated and they work on reentry. And this was for a person first language. And so. they
What
were
does that
talking-
mean, person first?
Meaning that you don't talk about an offender, you don't talk about a criminal, you don't talk about a person,
Got it. You see the person first, yeah.
put the person in first. So it's a person who was formerly incarcerated or a person who has been involved in the justice system. And they were talking about, they're all out now and they're all working for reentry, for people who are coming back from prison. And they talked about how much those terms like offender, criminal, stuck with them. And it's ways of, this is really talking directly when you see somebody, but it was really just the language that we use in assumptions about people is really tied back to this. I mean, I'm very struck by how tied this is to the ways in which we can even just change our language. It helps.
So the way you're saying the way we judge others and use terms, and then
Yes.
it's like they're beyond the pale. They're beyond.
Said, and she made it very personal. She goes, what if you lied once?
Yeah,
I did one thing. And
Mhm.
what if you lied once and forever after you were called?
we were called a liar, yeah.
And that really struck.
Mhm.
Well, your self-definition about stuff like that comes essentially from other people in the beginning. It comes from, and then what happens is you internalize, you take the position of other with respect to yourself. So somebody calls you a liar when you're a kid or says something to you like a negative thing. The process of bringing that into yourself, psychologically I'm talking, has to do with taking the position of other with respect to yourself. So what happens inside yourself, there is this other that's constantly calling you a liar. And it's hard to get rid of that.
And
for
they
sure.
talked about how important that was to maintain their own sense of self while all these people were calling them that.
The-
in prison. We see that in concentration camps, the same thing.
Right,
It's
well,
surviving.
but there's a positive to that too, and the positive is that if you want people, we want little kids to sort of conform to the culture that they're born into. So there's a lot of stuff, a lot of structure that
It
you
is.
have to give them.
Societal, it is. the societal can be pretty harsh too,
Sure.
but it is different than, because most of us in our lives, the way we do what I think you're talking about is when you would have a group of people who suddenly label another person in some way and say, oh, this person's terrible, and suddenly the whole group think of this person as terrible, and for that person to emerge out of that perception in that societal group or community is very hard, right? And once it's been, studies show that once when people talk about somebody and they get to that like common realization about this person is this bad thing, whatever it is, we're talking about them, something changes in the brain, they can see it, and so there's a sense of,
That's really.
so it's similar to what you're saying.
Thinking favorably is also.
Exactly,
speaking favorably.
yeah, no, it's very much speaking favorably, and that same Rebbe, there's a story where people came to him and everybody was discovered that one of the Hassidim was having an affair with someone else. And and everybody was like, oh, this person's terrible, we have to throw him out. And the Rebbe said, all these people who are saying about this one person that he's so terrible, had an affair, if everybody knew what they were up to behind the scenes, then and really this one person is just a person who got out. And so that's why suddenly, but it's better if everybody just looks at themselves and takes care of
Judge
their own
yourself
thing.
first.
Look to yourself
so
first.
essentially
And
all
so it's,
sins are communal sins. Isn't that
Yeah.
right? To be able to be, I mean, this is taking it to the extreme, but to be able to say somebody, to point the finger at somebody and they've done this, that has to be in the community. That has to be a known thing. Everybody has to have participated in some piece of that, to know what it is, even to be able to name it properly.
Well, that's, in general, it's better. I mean, as a society, we have to have laws, and that's something different. But as individuals, we need to the aim is be compassionate. And like I was saying, don't judge another person until you stood in their place, and you never know what's going on in the person's life, their conditions, their environment, the circumstances, their relationships, and it's better. Years ago, I was there was someone who was part of this community that I was part of, and they got some big job, and everybody was like, wow, person got some big job, and this person was a little bit like, look at me, I got this great job. And not long afterwards, suddenly the job was removed from this person, and this person who was who was in his final year of rabbinical school lost his ordination. And everybody was just wanting to talk about it, and what was it and what happened, and that was so much worse. I was like, I don't even want to talk about it. Why talk about it? Like, just let that person have their privacy and their thing, and I part of it is fear. People are worried what that happened to me, of course, but it's like look to your own self, and there's moments and how that's freeing. And there's a Rebbitzin who my father was very close to, and she would always say, it doesn't mean you close your eyes to what happens in the world. It's very important to see the world as it is, but she would say, see people as they are, but love them nonetheless. And so look at what's happening around you. It doesn't mean you should shut your eyes and say, I don't see anything that happens, because it helps your own understanding of life, and see people as they are, but love them nonetheless, and try and be compassionate, considerate. And often the things that come out that look to be the worst are not as bad as all the things that stay hidden and are really happening behind the surface between all kinds of people and things, and that are, the power struggles, and the people who are just more adept at hiding, their own kind of.
We have had over the years, in the almost 60 years I've belonged to the synagogue, 2 families who had a son who murdered someone. And the one mom, I always respected her so much. She would come every year for the high holiday. I can still visualize her where she sat in the last row in the end seat, because she stood by her son. She didn't judge him by only one thing. She judged him and loved him rather by other things. But that took a lot of guts to do that.
That's I mean, part of that story you know, of King David and others is, you know, it's not an easy world we live in. And, you know, and King David, what happened to him? I mean, what he did was a terrible thing he did, but, you know, this is what kings did, you know, and he, you know, I'm king of Israel, I can do what I want, you know, and this is, in the moment he got led, it's not excusing what he did, but there's, you know, there's a reason why it's spelled out here, because it happens a lot, right? You know, people use their power to do things they probably shouldn't do. And so the Torah, the Tanakh spells all these things out, and look what Abraham does to his own wife when they go right here, they go down to Egypt and twice, and he's worried that she's beautiful, and so they're going to kill him and take her, and so he's like, she's not my wife, she's my sister, and you know, it seems to be that she gets, you know, she's fair game, and so she gets abused. That seems to be, it's not spelled out, but
But then maybe even with
yeah.
the people in power who do a bad thing,
yeah.
can only look at that as the person, but have to look at the other things also about them.
You have a look at the other things, and I mean, it doesn't mean you don't pay a price. I mean, David pays a price, and if you're sincere, but it means, don't you go saying, oh, look, they're so bad and I'm so holy, you know, and I think that's the thing. Look to yourself, you know, don't go, it's so powerful in one's own path of self-growth to not spend all the time looking at others, but to spend that time looking on oneself. Because again, right, you make a mountain of other people's molehills, and of one's own mountains, we make molehills, you know, go ahead, yeah.
So in a way, I think we might be saying that we should think positive about David because he recognized that this wasn't a good thing to do. If he really believed in power, he would have said, well, he could do that, he's powerful.
Yes, then he
He didn't do that.
then there would have been no recourse, yeah. I think that's,
So we shouldn't give up on people.
he was he was at least struggling within himself, and then when he saw it, when it was pointed out to him, he saw it, right? And then the difference between David and Saul is Saul also, you know, made mistakes, but he was not forgiven because he was trying to justify it, you know, oh, you know, and he was trying to deny it. David did not deny it, and you know, David was a human, very human, you know, so. But so it's saying again, you know, judge yourself.
You
Let's go to the next one. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can
go
I,
ahead.
yeah, you know, several years ago, about 20 years ago, I was unemployed and underemployed, and I did substitute teaching at our Oak Park River Forest High School. And one of the classes that I was assigned to as a substitute teacher was the special ed class, and it was all boys. And what they told me before I went in is they said, you know, these kids are really, this is their last opportunity to stay in high school, but they want to be here. And that's why we have this class. So, you know, and they got to, you know, I wasn't a special ed person. They said, if you have any problems, you know, contact this guy to help you, the principal or whatever. So I went into this class, and it was really interesting. Shortly after I started the class, one of the boys said to me, you know, every single one of us has been in jail. And I said to him, I'm like, why is that the first thing you would want somebody to know about you, that you've been in jail? And his response was, well, because, you know, people are usually afraid. And it's kind of funny because I'm a very hard person to intimidate. And so it didn't bother me. But it was really interesting because during the course of that day, out of all the substitute classes that I did, I learned so much from these children myself that 20 years later, it still stays with me. And I think when you apply that blessing to other people, when you judge them differently, that you receive a blessing on yourself as well, because you open your eyes to them as somebody else. And I learned several significant lessons during that day about people. And so I just wanted to toss that out.
Beautiful. Thank you. The people, you know, the Baal Shem Tov's texts are the rest of the source sheet, but there's a story that when he passed away, there was a can't remember his name. I think it was Shmuel the Ganaf, a guy who was a professional thief who went,
Shmuel the guy.
Kinda.
yeah, went to his grave and said, you know, now that he's gone, who's gonna be the Rebbe for all the people like us, you know? And so, because he was like, he didn't just throw them all out and judge them harshly, but he had a place in his heart for all the people who need it. Well, let's go to, you know, the more we can do that in our life, and you know, we're not, most of us are not in a position where, usually most of this is smaller sins, right? That we're seeing and that we're judging and thinking about, and but there's the big ones too, you know. But it's, I agree. I think that when you bring your compassion to it, and it brings blessing to you and to them, and that's not, it does the opposite. And that's actually what the Baal Shem will say a few texts from now. But Norma, if you don't mind reading number 4.
4. Baal Shem Tov, Al HaTorah, Kedoshim 3. Learn to judge all sinners and libertines favorably, like the verse says. Deliver me from all my transgressions. Make me not the reproach of the wicked. When you see them transgress, judge them favorably, for you are judging yourself. With all your strength, help them to repent and cleanse them from the filth of their sins. Know with certainty that you also have a little bit of this sin in you. And just as you look favorably upon yourself, so you should look favorably and with love on all Israel. For the one thing they all have in common is that they are all righteous, all holy, and all deserving of all the blessing.
Such a beautiful way to look at other people, right? All righteous, all holy, all deserving of all the blessings. And never cut off and say a person is not deserving of blessing.
Right.
That's
And Diane, I subbed in, when Howard was in the army, I subbed in those classes also. I think it was 22 years old. And I subbed in special ed kids, and one little boy stood up the first day and said, Mrs. Berlin, I am going to we used to have shades, and they had little round things on the bottom, and I'm gonna walk over to the windowsill and hang myself up on the shade. Well, okay, what do I do about this? So I said, whatever his name was, okay, but for right now, sit down. You and I can talk about that later. You're a very nice little boy. The kid was like shook up, you know, he sat down. And after school, I took him home. I went to meet his parents to find out, you know, what was actually going on in that household. The mother was semi-bedridden.
Wow.
The father was mentally, and how he ever became a sergeant in the army, I don't know. He was very mentally disturbed, you know. But then I understood the kid.
yeah.
And I mean, this was like 70 years ago. I still, or 65, I still think about that little boy.
Well, reminds us, I think it reminds all of us of all of our own places.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You know, all of our rough places. And but one can't always extend kind of visible compassion on people who've done terrible things. Sometimes there's gotta be, but at least in one's heart, to have compassion and not always think this person is, you know.
They think they're gonna get yelled at also. Right?
Yeah, well, as we're all saying, I think a lot of these people, and I say when I grew up in France, partly where they had a very old school system. When I was 11 years old and went 12 and went to middle school, over there, if you had less than 10 out of 20 at the end of the year, you repeated the year. So my class were people that already repeated 3 times.
No.
We were 11, they were 14, 15. And they, you know, and there were people just giving up on them, you know, and they did not believe that they were deserving of all the blessings, right? Nobody believed they were deserving of any blessing. People were just waiting until they turned 16 and could go become
Kick 'em,
bakers
right.
and, you know, and do things, you know, the professions, you know, and so the, you know, we so easily turn.
If you treat someone like you don't believe that they have anything.
Then they internalize it, right? And then they internalize it, and they
become
act it,
that.
but
Right.
when you change it and you do it, and I think this gets to our next one, Barbara, if you don't mind reading number 5.
Baal Shem Tov, Al HaTorah, Kedoshim 19. But he said in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, may his memory be blessed, that it is from the causes of the matter that brings certain person to speak evil speech about his fellow. For is it not known that something is created for every word a man puts out of his mouth? If the word is not a holiness, something holy will be created from it. And also the opposite, if the word has a transgression in it, some husk is created from it.
So he then goes on with this, and it's too complicated, I don't wanna get up at it, but what he says even takes it further, he says that when you say something negative about someone, it creates in spirit husk, which is almost like a cloud, like a negative husk. But then he says if another person comes close to it, and if they hear that negative thing, they have a choice. Either they can dispel a little bit of it or add to the husk and make the husk even bigger. And the husk grows and becomes a bigger and bigger thing. And I think it sounds very esoteric, but I think we've all experienced it, like you talk about it, and soon enough, there's a whole cloud around. It's almost like you can touch it. It's so tangible, right? Around a person, and a rumor about a person or a thought about who this person is. And, and then, but if you say, no, I refuse, either you say it out loud or you don't add your energy to it, right? This is what he says. He says, you add your own energy to it, positive, negative, or neutral, right? And so if you don't say anything, then it doesn't continue growing and become, and in spiritual terms, we call this a thought form. And this is actually, there's a whole body in Kabbalah, it's thought of a little bit differently, but it's like humanity has thought forms too, right? Anti-Semitism is a thought form. There's like in the global unconscious, there's a way of thinking about Jewish people in the subconscious, right? It's there in the global unconscious, and so many things, right? And so, but about people too. And when you go around, you add it's like this thing that follows around, and it creates negativity, right? It creates tremendous negativity. And then so to dispel it takes a lot of oomph.
Yeah, so
Social media.
speech itself is a creative act.
Mhm.
And as you speak, you create something, and we do that all the time.
I now pronounce you man and wife.
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
exactly. But it doesn't seem to be that concrete. It
I now
seems-
pronounce you a criminal. for
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Or a liar.
I
Well-
pronounce you a schizophrenic, or I'm gonna give you a diagnosis.
Yeah.
But
All of
but that's not exactly this. That's more something official, right? That's,
Mm.
I mean, it's when you bring spirit into it, right? And then when you bring, it can be, right? When I pronounce you man and wife, there is spirit into it,
Mhm.
because it's, hopefully we're bringing spirit into it. There's people around it. You're sanctifying the moment of spirit. But there's also, I pronounce you a criminal, or I pronounce you that. If it's coming from an official source, is also just, the words have power, but also I guess everybody hears it too, right? Everybody then sends their energy into it, and then it becomes like a reality.
So much of this, I'm thinking, the thing that came to my mind is social media.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
much of this assumes interactional
Mm-hmm.
relationships.
Mm-hmm.
When it becomes performative,
Hmm.
what do we do?
What do you mean by performative?
That I'm saying it because there's a performance of saying it. I'm saying it not because I'm saying these things to another person, but I am really enacting myself. I'm part of the whole.
You're bringing the
performance going on
negativity. You're
here.
part of the negativity around it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is very performative.
Yeah. No, it is, and it's less. I think it still
we
brings
get back to
negativity.
the-
It brings the negativity. It creates negativity, whether it's in person or on the web. It brings. You can feel it, right? You can feel the negativity and the stream of power that it has, and the more people latch onto it, the more it becomes, and it has power to it. People enjoy it, right? This is.
And it feels like there's
Feels
so
good.
little we can do by just saying, I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to, I'm going
Yeah.
to be favor.
But
Because it's such a big force.
I mean, it is, but one can, there are, again, social media for all, I am not an expert, and I don't do social media almost at all, but you have a whole thing and everybody's like, yes, but then suddenly if someone comes with a little oomph and makes a comment saying, I don't agree with this, I think this is wrong, sometimes it will actually go the other way, and suddenly the thing will suddenly start to change, and you can almost feel like the energy of it is changing. Sometimes you can't, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it just becomes 10 times worse because everybody's arguing, but I see when I think you feel with human beings, it's part of the politics of human beings, right? One person goes around one person, oh, this person is terrible. But then if there's a few of those people that have a conversation with another person who's like, it's almost like they come and they change a block inside, says, well, is this person really so bad? Maybe think about this, like, oh yeah. And that oh yeah moment suddenly changes the energy of the conversation overall. And it starts to reshift the conversation and to do it. And that's, this is human politics, so much of this.
Social
you-
media has the most negative power, I think, on the young
Well, but
people.
it's just human speech. I mean, it's just human speech written in human,
But
social media. A
with
good
young
example
people,
is
they
social-
don't know, they don't have enough experience to deal with it.
Yeah, well, sure. There's another example I always find interesting about the power of speech, or the power of a rumor, a speech that turns into a rumor. That bank is gonna go bankrupt. Okay, and what happens if enough people hear the rumor, spread the rumor? People are lined up at the bank the next day, pulling their
That
money out,
happens
and the
after-
bank
Yeah.
goes bankrupt.
Couple
Sure.
of years ago.
So
they
they're,
did.
yeah, and that's just
Yeah,
one example.
happens in Mary
of-
Poppins. But I mean, and part of what this is saying is that the person who starts that is judging, there's that. I mean, that's in general Judaism teaching about the words. Words have power when you do something, right? This is the Talmud says when you whiten your friend's face in public, i.e. you make them feel bad, it's as if you murdered them. And so that's and there's long things about, well, what exactly does that mean? And the Talmud really strongly believes in the power of words, and that, it's all, there's always, most people are careful in some ways, and in some ways are not careful. There's always the people that we like to, people or areas or groups of people, and it's very hard to do it, but it's awareness of it. And in general, in the spiritual path, I think there's a very strong sense of the more you can look to yourself and not look to others for their faults is incredibly powerful for your self-growth. Because first of all, you see your own, if you really think, oh, that person's terrible for that reason, if you have a moment of like, oh, maybe I have a little bit of that myself, and that's a really powerful opportunity to oneself have a little bit of growth. But I want to go to the last one because I think it's very nice. David.
You shall love your fellow as yourself, means that just as you act with your fellow with love and unity, so too with you will I act, said the Lord. The last part of the verse is the Psalms say, God is your shadow. As a person acts with his friend and fellow below with love and good virtues, so too the sovereign acts with you as a shadow. That all movement a person does, God follows. This is what it means. Love your neighbor as yourself, and all will be good for you.
So, because the verse says, this one I translated, so it's got a few typos, but I think it's easier to read than the others, because I tried to make it flow more. But you shall love your fellow as yourself. I am the Lord your God, it says. So it's saying so it's like if you love the Lord your God, if you love your fellow as yourself, then God is loving you. You're in the same, you're judging yourself in the same. So there's the whole concept of God is your shadow. So God is watching, and as we're kind and compassionate to others, God then is like, well, and you can almost see that happening in one's own life, as we're all saying, that when you judge others, it brings blessings to you and to them, right? Automatically, when you judge kindly to others, because you're living in that place of kindness, compassion. And when you judge others, you live in a place of harsh judgment. So first of all, you often then end up judging yourself harshly too, right? People who judge very harshly often judge themselves very harshly too. And then life often has moments where then it kind of comes back to one, because that's just the state of mind one lives in. And when one lives in a place of kind of compassion and love, then usually you draw that, because that's your state of mind, and that's what draws other people and everything in that way. And so
And judge them favorably, maybe they'll get better also.
yeah. Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, I just think it's a lovely image of God. Moves as you.
Moves as you move, and
And reading this makes you think about yourself and what you do. Hey, maybe I do that too, better not.
well, we all do it. If you think as God as your shadow, right? It's so we sow our own problems, right? So it is, but the amazing capacity, like David, that we all have to then also try and make it right. And I always, for all of these, the self-transformation track is very intense. We all connect to it because we all do it, right? There's not a single one of us who doesn't do any of this. But I always go back to Rabbi Nachman, who says, if you change just one little thing in yourself, then you've accomplished your life's purpose, right? So it's a, even if we move a little bit in this area, we've made a huge fix. And the part that I didn't bring is the Baal Shem Tov says, every time you do this, you also fix the whole universe, right? So every time we do this, we're not just helping ourselves, but we're fixing the whole universe, and that's, and so this is looking to oneself is in all the areas, brings wholeness. Thank you, everyone.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
you.
Really good.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Very interesting listening to all of you. I learned more than one thing today.
Thank you, Tim.